Most engineers are underpaid, not because they lack skill, but because they can't prove their value in terms of business impact. In this video, I'm going to describe the 5 areas where all engineering activity resides. And then I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can prove your value as an engineer. Let's jump right into it. So what are those 5 areas where all engineering activity can be put? What are those 5 buckets? The first bucket is revenue generation. Revenue generation. What do I mean by revenue generation? Revenue generation is the actual activities that you do as an engineer that bring in revenue. It turns out that sales engineers can have a very high revenue generation capability inside of a business, but also other engineers that are able to speak to customers, interact with customers, or have capability that customers are specifically after, and they want to talk directly to those engineers. The engineers that can interact with customers, cause revenue to enter the company directly are revenue generating engineers. Other ways that engineers generate revenue is through developing products. Some engineers are like product development masters. Just they generate one product after another after another. They understand technology, they understand customer needs, and they generate products that address those needs. And of course, businesses love engineers who can interact with customers, generate sales directly. Businesses love engineers who can generate products. Why? Because it impacts the bottom line of the business. Another area where engineers generate value is in cost reduction. What do I mean by cost reduction? Cost reduction is the process of addressing costs that in production, cost in providing the services to customers. For instance, some engineers are masters at identifying those parts of the system that aren't actually adding value to a particular customer, or parts of the system that aren't actually required, or they're very, very good at negotiating costs with suppliers, which is a special talent. Those engineers that are able to reduce the cost of operating and providing services and products to customers are extremely valuable to businesses, and they receive the pay and the promotions that they deserve. Another critical area that engineers add value is in risk reduction. What do I mean by risk reduction? There are risks in anything that a business does, but especially in the development of a product or in providing services to a customer. It's risky to develop a product. Why? Because the product may not be of interest to the marketplace. You may develop a product and no one buys it. It happens very often, all too often for some businesses. Or you may develop a product or service that you expect to generate X number of dollars in revenue, and it ends up generating X divided by 10, or worse yet, X divided by 1,000. And so the ability to reduce the risk in developing a product is extremely valuable to a business, because the risk that the investments won't pay off goes down. There are other types of risk mitigation. Systems engineers and program managers are very good at reducing the risk to execution on programs and on product developments. In fact, there are some engineers that develop their whole career around just reducing the risk in businesses. It's its own thing, and it's a formal discipline within engineering and other disciplines. So risk reduction is one of those areas where engineering activity is placed, and it occurs at all levels. Even the most junior engineer to the most senior engineer in a company is going to be involved in risk management. Another critical area is in time savings. What do I mean by time savings? It takes a certain amount of time to deliver a product to a customer. It takes a certain amount of time to deliver a service to a customer. And if an engineer can figure out a way to reduce the amount of time that it takes to produce a product or to engineer a product or to deliver a service to a customer, those things have direct impact, direct financial impact upon the business. And those engineers who have a talent for that and a skill for that are rewarded accordingly. In fact, every engineer is really uh, motivated to optimize. At least most engineers that I know of have this inherent drive to be efficient, to not waste their time. They don't want to have to go through and repeat steps they've done previously. They want to do them right the first time, and they want their results to have an impact on the business in the most efficient way possible. So the ability to reduce the time that it takes to develop to deliver the products and services to customers is extremely valuable to businesses. And that's one of the areas where engineers will invest their time. In fact, there are whole businesses that exist out there that specialize in efficiency for businesses. And some of them are literally billion-dollar businesses that are providing the service to their clients of improving their efficiency and reducing the time it takes to be able to execute on the services and products that they develop. The fifth area where engineers add value to businesses is in strategic impact. Strategic impact is the ability of an engineer to see into the future of what the businesses should be doing today. And this ability to do that, and not all engineers have this ability, but those engineers that have the ability to see into the future and see where the company should be investing money in processes, where companies should be investing in product development, where companies should be investing in research and development. Those engineers that can see the future accurately and direct company resources in a strategic way are very valuable to a business, because it's great to have a business that's successful today, but the goal is to have a business that's successful over time. And that requires engineers who understand strategic impact. And the engineers who understand strategic impact and can deliver on that are worth a ton of money to businesses, and they get well compensated. The engineers who can quantify their positive impact on the business are the engineers who are seen as and perceived as the most valuable to the business. And it turns out that the engineers who are perceived as the most valuable are the ones who receive the pay raises and the promotions that everyone is seeking. So I've developed 10 value signals. They are ratios that you can use to quantify the value that you bring to the business. And I'm going to describe 3 of these now. They are powerful and they will change your career, change the trajectory of your career. And they're a tool that you can use during your reviews and during your conversations with your bosses to show that you are impacting the business in very massive positive ways. The first ratio is a direct revenue generation ratio. So the direct revenue generation ratio, and it's equal to the direct revenue that you generate divided by your annual salary. So the direct revenue that you generate every single year, let's say that you are an engineer that has contacts in industry that your business is going to be pursuing as possible customers for your services and your products, and you're able to make contact with those industry possible customers and generate a relationship with them through your business, and that they turn into customers because of your direct effort with them, then that's revenue that you're bringing into the business. If you're a sales engineer, you are directly communicating to customers about the services and the products that your business can offer them to solve their problems. And you're having a direct impact on the revenue of the business. That's why sales engineers get paid so much money, is because they are the front end of the business. They're the ones that are bringing in the revenue, and But you can be just one of the engineers on the team, but you have contacts in the industry and you know how to work those contacts to be able to bring in revenue. The level of revenue that you bring in relative to your annual salary is a ratio, a number that can be calculated. As an example, say that there's a customer that you had developed that is bringing in $1 million into the company. In other words, they're issuing a purchase order to your company for $1 million. And then let's say that your annual salary is $100,000. Then your direct revenue generation ratio for that year is going to be a 10x. You're bringing in 10 times the revenue than what you're being paid as far as salary. That's a pretty good ratio. Some engineers, sales engineers will have ratios of 10, 20, or 100 or more. And the higher that ratio, the more valuable you are to the business. It's hard to deny if you're pursuing customers and a particular customer has issued an order to your company and then of course pays that on the invoices that go out, that you have a positive impact on the business, and it's easier for you to then go into your boss and say, look, I brought in 10x return on my current salary. I deserve a pay raise. I should be paid more, and then I'm going to be even more motivated next year to bring in more revenue and to really provide excellent services to this customer so that they will give us more business in the future, this customer that I just brought in. And so you can go into your boss and say, look, I think I have a very solid case for a 10% or 20% pay raise. And then you have quantifiable numbers. It's just not you going in to your boss with your hat in your hand and asking for a raise. You have quantifiable numbers. I am impacting the business positively. This is a very powerful way to communicate your value to the business. And I strongly recommend that if you are in this position where you are bringing in business into your company, or if you desire to bring in business to your company and you're successful, use this ratio to justify additional pay to you. Another area where engineers can justify their pay raises and their promotions. And this ratio is actually pretty common for engineers. It's the direct product revenue ratio. The direct product revenue ratio. And the direct product revenue ratio is equal to the ratio of the product sales of a product that you have developed and divided by your annual salary, your total annual salary. So you can imagine if you're an engineer and you're leading a team that has developed a product that is bringing in, let's say, $2 million a year in business, or let's make it $4 million a year in business, because it's not unusual for engineers to develop products that bring in multiple millions to hundreds of millions of dollars on a single product. So at $4 million of total product sales, divided by your annual salary, and in this case, let's say that your annual salary is $200K per year. Your ratio is now 20-1. Your product development is having a 20-1 impact. You're generating 20 times your annual salary in revenue for the business. Now, you're not the only one that is contributing to the business, right? As far as that $4 million in sales, the sales engineers or other engineers or other executives or other salespeople are involved in selling that product. So you're not the only one with their hands on it. Just like the sales engineer isn't the only one that has their hands on the success of selling, right? The engineers have to develop that product. So with all of these ratios, I'm bringing it up now, but for all of these ratios, you're not the only one with your hand in the success of a particular sale or a particular revenue number that comes into the business, but you do have an impact. And that's why you can justify incremental increases into your pay. So imagine this, right? You a product, you get a requirement for a product, you develop that product, and it brings in a revenue that's 20 times your annual salary. And that's a very powerful argument to have for justifying, let's say, a 10% pay raise or a 20% pay raise. So instead of receiving that 2 or 3% or 4% or maybe 5% that everyone else is getting, you can get double that or maybe quadruple that by quantifying the positive impact you're having on the business relative to product sales that are the direct result of your engineering work. A third ratio that I have developed for quantifying the impact that engineers have on the business is the risk reduction ratio. The risk reduction ratio is equal to the new risk level divided by the baseline or base risk level. So what this is, it's a ratio that says after the work that I as an engineer have done, the risk on a particular project or product or other parameter important to the business has been reduced. And so for these ratios, the goal is to have the highest number possible in the risk reduction ratio. Then you want to have a number that's less than 1. The lower it is, the better. The lower the risk reduction ratio is, the more impact, the more positive impact we've had on the business. And you'll notice something really important here in this particular ratio. Some ratios have your annual salary in the denominator, and other ratios will not have your annual salary in the denominator. For instance, a risk reduction ratio will not have your annual salary in the denominator. So which of these ratios do you think are going to be more positively impacting on your ability to receive pay raises and promotions? Of course, the first two are, because they're directly related to your annual salary, whereas the risk reduction ratio is not. But it's still a positive argument that you can have for your raises or your promotions. In fact, there are some people who build their whole career on risk reduction. There are companies out there, very valuable, highly valued companies out there that have as their core business the reduction of risk that they provide to their customers. Now, of course, a person could transform the risk reduction ratio into a quantifiable amount of risk that the business has benefited from. In other words, the company has the risk has been reduced by a certain dollar amount. But I have found that when you go into your boss and you try to convert risks into dollars, that's always a point of discussion and debate if that risk reduction really translates into those dollar amounts. But if the company is tracking risks with like a risk register, you can just look at the risks, the new risk level compared to the prior risk level before your risk reduction efforts, and you can have a quantifiable number that you can defend very well, and you can with confidence relate to your boss and to those executives in the business when you brief those executives on the status of a particular project. And when you can show that you've reduced the risk on a particular project by 50%, they will understand that that has a impact on the finances of the business, and it has a positive impact on the future and on the current revenue of the business. So you can use this ratio to justify your pay raises and those promotions that you desire. I highly recommend that you use these 3 ratios to describe to your managers the business impact that you're having. It is a powerful way for you to set yourself apart from other engineers on your team, other engineers at the company, and for you to build that case to get the big pay raises and the promotions that you deserve. I have developed, as I had said, 10 of these, so there's 7 others, and I'll describe those in other videos. These are powerful ways. I highly encourage you to use them.